Monster City Madhouse, a year-round online store full of Halloween and classic horror shirts, with an emphasis on the vintage look. Use code SAVE10 for 10% off your order. MonsterCityMadhouse.com. Free shipping and financing's available. Welcome back to Southern Ghost Stories. I am the American Haunted historian, Alan Searcy. Glad you guys are with me now. And man, I'm just glad it's some warmer weather. This ice has just been disastrous for Middle Tennessee. I know other parts of the country, especially the Northeast, were hit pretty hard. But yeah, the sun is out, and I'm glad for it. So hey, right off the top, man, make sure you're following Southern Ghost Stories on Facebook, Instagram. Send me some questions. I told you guys here in a few weeks I'll be doing a listener Q&A. I've been kind of stockpiling questions. I love interacting with you guys, and I've got some fun stuff we talk about here in a few weeks. So today, I hinted at it on Tuesday. I'm going out west, actually the Northwest. I have friends and family out there in the Northwest, and I spent a little bit of time up in Seattle in the Washington area. So I want to go to Spokane, not too terribly far away from Seattle. So there's a specific kind of silence you can only find in the inland Northwest. It's not a peaceful quiet. It's a kind that feels like the woods are holding their breath. If you drive out to the West Plains of Spokane, just past the point where the city lights start to flicker out, you'll find Greenwood Cemetery. Well, most people come to Greenwood to pay their respects. But if you grew up in the Lilac City, you know you don't come to Greenwood for the headstones. You come for the stairs. They call them the 1,000 Steps. It's a local rite of passage. It's a test of courage that has sent generations of teenagers sprinting back to their cars in a blind panic. But here's the thing about the 1,000 Steps. The name is a lie. And in this case, the truth is actually much weirder than the legend. To understand why these steps feel so wrong, you have to look at why they're there. In the early 20th century, the Fraternal Order of the Elks had a vision. They wanted a private, grand terrace carved into the hillside for their members. They built a massive, sweeping stone staircase meant to lead to a prestigious burial site. But then, the money dried up. The Great Depression hit. The Elks went bust. I mean, a lot of people did. And the project, it was abandoned right in the middle of it. So what's left today, it's not a grand monument. It's a jagged stone staircase that leads to a plateau of nothing. It's a literal stairway to nowhere. 60 steps of crumbling basalt being slowly eaten by the weeds. So why do we call them the 1,000 Steps? If you ask the skeptics, it's just hyperbole. But if you ask anyone who has stood there on those stones at 2 o'clock in the morning, they'll tell you that by the time you reach the middle, the air gets so thick, your legs get so heavy, that 60 steps, man, it might as well be a mile. The legend says if you make the climb at midnight, you aren't climbing alone. People report a physical resistance, like the atmosphere itself is trying to push you back down towards the road. It's a sensation of phantom hands catching your ankles, or a cold palm pressing against your chest, holding you in place. And then there are the witnesses. As you ascend the stairs, look to your left or right into the thicket of trees. People swear they see them there, the shadow people. They aren't just blurry shapes. They're described as distinct silhouettes of men, women, and children. They don't move. They don't scream. They just stand in the shadows and they watch you. There's a local story about a group of students who tried to count the steps out loud as they climbed to prove the whole legend was wrong. They got to step 30 when the air temperature supposedly dropped 20 or 30 degrees, and the sound of children's laughter came from a spot where it shouldn't have come from. They didn't finish the count. They ran. Because in Greenwood, the fear isn't about what's at the top. It's about what might be waiting for you to turn your back and head back down. In the end, the 1,000 Steps are a monument to what happens when we leave things unfinished. It's a place where the physical world and the other world seem to blur, tucked away in a corner of Spokane that the city tried to forget. Is it just the cliffs playing tricks on our ears? Is it just the wind? Or is there something about a creepy burial ground that refuses to stay empty? The next time you're feeling brave, head out to the West Plains. Count the steps for yourself. Just don't be surprised if halfway up you realize you've lost count. And you aren't the only one breathing there in the dark. So, I want to move down a little bit over towards, it's Gonzaga. It's not too terribly far away from where the Thousand Steps are. So, in the heart of the Gonzaga University campus, it stands a building that looks like it belongs to a Victorian period piece. Monaghan Hall. It's a stunning piece of architecture. Sandstone walls, ornate wood carvings, and a history that stretches back to the late 1800s. It was built by James Monaghan, a man who helped shape the inland Northwest. For decades, it was a home, and then it was a music building. But by the 1970s, it became something else entirely. It became a place where the laws of physics seemed to bend, and where the faculty and the students found themselves sharing the hallways with something that didn't pay tuition. So we're going to look at a few cases in Washington State history where a haunting was so documented, so violent, and so undeniable, the Catholic Church felt it had no choice but to intervene. This is a story of exorcism of Monaghan Hall. It's like I said, James Monaghan, he was a titan of Spokane. He was a pioneer, a businessman, and a family man. When he built this mansion, it was a symbol of all of his success. But mansions have a way of absorbing the lives inside of them. Monaghan died in the house in 1916. Later, his daughter lived there, and eventually the family donated the building to Gonzaga. In the 1970s, Monaghan Hall served as the music department. It was a place of constant sound, pianos, violins, flutes, other instruments. But faculty members started noticing sounds that didn't quite belong. It started small. The professor would be working late and hear a flute playing a beautiful, mournful melody in the basement. They'd go downstairs to tell the student to head home, only to find the basement was pitch black and the doors had been locked from the outside. Well, then the glitches started. Security guards, tough, practical men reported seeing doors that they had just locked standing wide open seconds later. They would hear footsteps pacing the floor above them when they knew for a fact the building was completely empty. One guard reported seeing a shadowy figure standing at the top of the grand staircase. But when he shined his flashlight, the figure didn't vanish. It just stepped into the wall. By 1974, the atmosphere in Monaghan Hall had turned from eerie to oppressive. It wasn't just about sightings anymore. It was about the physical manifestation. Students practicing in the soundproof room began reporting the feeling of being watched. But it wasn't a passive observation. They felt a palpable, heavy malice. Objects started moving. A metronome would slide across the piano. Sheet music would be swiped off a stand by an invisible hand. The most terrifying reports came from the basement. Like I said, they'd heard music coming from down there. The old boiler room and the storage areas made up the basement. Guards began to hear growling. Not animal growls, but a low, guttural sound that seemed to vibrate in the listener's chest. One student reported being physically pushed down the stairs. Another claimed that a heavy organ, weighing hundreds of pounds, had moved several feet overnight without leaving a single scratch on the floorboards. Something had picked it up and moved it. The campus was buzzing, and this just wasn't a ghost story anymore. The faculty was rattled, and the students were terrified to practice after dark. The university, which is actually a Jesuit institution, found itself in a unique position. They didn't just have a ghost hunters. They had some of the most learned theologians in the country on staff. And they realized they were dealing with something that wasn't just a restless spirit. In early 1975, the decision was made. Too much had been going on. They wouldn't call a repairman or psychologist. They called a priest. The university had always been somewhat tight-lipped about the specifics, but local accounts and reports from the Gonzaga Bulletin paint a vivid picture. a formal rite of exorcism, or at the very least a major solemn blessing of the house was performed that night. The priest moved from every room and from the attic to the dark corners of the basement, armed with holy water and incense. Witnesses say that the prayers were read, and the building seemed to react. Pipes groaned. The temperature in the basement plummeted to near freezing. There was a sense of pressure building up within the walls, like the house was trying to hold its breath. Then, as the final prayers were said, the pressure snapped. A silence fell over Monaghan Hall that hadn't been felt in years. For a while, it worked. The violent outburst stopped. The growling ceased. The heavy furniture and pianos, they stayed put. But the stain of what was there never truly washed away. To this day, music students still talk about the basement vibe. They say that while the threat is gone, the presence remains. You'll be practicing a difficult piece, and for a split second, you'll hear a phantom flute melody mimicking your notes from the hallway. And Monaghan Hall is still standing. It's still beautiful. If you walk past it today, you'll likely see students with instrument cases ducking inside, rushing to their next rehearsal. But if you look up at the second-story windows when the sun goes down, you might notice the shadows inside seem a little darker than they should be. Remind us that Spokane isn't just a city of lilacs and bridges. It's a city of layers. And sometimes those layers don't want to stay buried in the past. So, if you want to understand the soul of Spokane, you have to walk through the revolving doors of the historic Davenport Hotel. When it opened in 1914, it wasn't just a hotel. It was a statement. Louis Davenport, the man behind the vision, wanted to bring world-class luxury to what was then a rough-and-tumble logging and mining hub. He didn't hold back. He put in the first air conditioning system in the country, a pipe organ that could shake the foundations, and a lobby so opulent it felt like a cathedral for the wealthy. It was the kind of place where the silver was polished daily, and the Davenport hospitality was legendary. It was meant to be a sanctuary of perfect order and high society. But even the most perfect buildings have cracks. In 1920, the Davenport's polished reputation was shattered, literally, by an accident so bizarre and so public that it has left a permanent stain on the hotel's history. It's a story of a woman who stepped into the dark and never came back. The date was August 17, 1920. The hotel was buzzing. The lobby was filled with guests in tuxedos and evening gowns. The air was smelling of expensive cigars and perfume. Among the guests was Ellen McNamara, a visitor from out of town who was staying on one of the upper floors. Now, the Davenport's architecture is beautiful, but it's kind of complex. Above the famous lobby sits a massive glass skylight hidden away in a light well that helps illuminate the heart of the building. To a guest wandering the corridors at night, a wrong turn can lead you into service areas that weren't designed for public foot traffic. According to the reports from that night, Ellen was looking for the bathroom. She was in a part of a hotel she wasn't quite familiar with. Maybe the lighting was dim. Maybe she was just disoriented. She opened a door she shouldn't have, stepped out onto what she likely thought was a dark floor, and felt the world drop away. She had stepped directly onto the glass of the skylight. Imagine the scene in the lobby. 1 second, it's a picture of high society elegance. The next, the ceiling explodes. Shards of heavy glass rain down like diamonds on the diners below, followed by the body of Ellen McNamara hitting the floor. The impact was devastating. She had fallen several stories. In the chaos that followed, the music stopped. People rushed over towards her. Despite the height of the fall, Ellen didn't die right away. As she lay there on the marble floor of the lobby, surrounded by terrified strangers in their finest clothes, she reportedly looked up with a look of utter confusion. Her final words, whispered just before she drifted away, were, "Where did I go?" It wasn't just a question about her location in the hotel. It felt like a question about her soul, a moment of profound disorientation that seemed to tether her to the building forever. She died shortly after, leaving behind a hotel that would never quite feel the same again. The Davenport went through many phases after that. It fell into disrepair. It was vacant for years, and eventually restored to its former glory. But through the decades of dust and the millions of dollars in renovations, Ellen McNamara stayed behind. Now, the most common report from guests today isn't some kind of scary haunting. It's a somber one. People standing in the lobby often look up to the mezzanine railing and see a woman in 1920s attire. She's usually described as wearing a long dress, her hair pinned up in the style of the era. She isn't transparent or glowing. She looks so real that guests often assume she's an actress or a staff member in period costume. Until she disappears. Witnesses say she spends her time leaning over the railing, staring fixedly at the exact spot where she hit the floor. She isn't looking for help. She isn't screaming. She just seems to be searching for that answer, trying to figure out where she went and why she never made it back to her room. Davenport's still a place of luxury. You can still go there today, grab a drink in the Peacock Lounge, and admire the gold leaf on the ceilings. But if you find yourself walking the mezzanine late at night, and you see a woman in vintage dress staring down at the lobby floor, maybe don't disturb her. She's just a guest who took a wrong turn over a century ago, and she's still waiting for someone to show her the way out. So here's something I found researching Spokane, and I thought this was just so wild and over the top, I had to include it in the podcast. If you walked into the Spokane City Council meeting in the 1990s, you might have seen a man who looked like he stepped out of a movie. He wore loud, flashy suits, often bright or pure white, covered in gold jewelry. He had a booming voice and a stare that could burn a hole through bulletproof glass. His name was Jimmy Marks. To the city government, he was a nuisance. To the local police, he was a target. But to the Roma community, a group often called gypsies by outsiders, he was a king. Most cities have legends about ancient curses from the 1800s. Spokane's different. Their most famous curse didn't happen in the pioneer days. It happened on live television, in front of the mayor, and it was fueled by one of the most controversial civil rights battles in Washington state history. We're going to look at the man, the raid, and the day Jimmy Marks told a ghost to move into City Hall. To understand the curse, you have to understand Jimmy. He was part of the Marks family, a prominent Roma clan that had been in Spokane for generations. Jimmy was the leader. He was flamboyant, wealthy, and fiercely protective of his culture. The Roma people have a history of being defined as outsiders. They have their own laws, their own traditions, and a deep-seated distrust of the non-Roma world. Jimmy lived in a world where family was everything, and the police were always the enemy. By the mid-1980s, Jimmy was a local celebrity. He owned properties. He drove nice cars and was loud about his success. But in 1986, the tension between the Marks family and the Spokane Police Department reached a boiling point. The police suspected the family was involved in a series of jewelry thefts. They didn't just want a suspect. They wanted to take down the whole gypsy operation. On June 18, 1986, the Spokane Police Department launched a massive raid on two of Marks' family homes. They weren't exactly subtle. Officers reportedly used sledgehammers to tear into the walls. They ripped up the floorboards. They even searched the family's traditional court area. They seized $1.6 million in cash and a staggering amount of jewelry, over 600 pieces. But here's the problem. They didn't just take suspected stolen goods. They took family heirlooms. They took cash Jimmy claimed was the collective savings of his community that was kept in his house because his people didn't trust banks. Jimmy Marks didn't just see this as a criminal investigation. He saw it as a hate crime. He claimed the police had violated their religious privacy, mocked their customs, and treated them like animals. The charges eventually fell apart. Most of the jewelry was ordered returned, but the damage was done. Jimmy didn't want an apology. He wanted vengeance. And this is where the story turns into folklore. Jimmy Marks decided that if the law wouldn't give him justice, his heritage would. He formally placed a curse on the city of Spokane, specifically targeting the city council and the police department. He told them their luck would dry up. He told them their secrets would come out. And then he became a professional haunt. Every time a city official was caught in a scandal, and in Spokane in the 90s, it happened a lot, Jimmy would show up at the council meetings. He'd stand at the podium. jingling the gold coins in his vest and remind them the curse is working. When the city faced a budget crisis, Jimmy was there. When a mayor was recalled, Jimmy was there too. He became a living omen. People laughed it off in public, but behind closed doors, there was a genuine superstitious shiver in City Hall. Jimmy was a man who lived to be a thorn in the side of the establishment, and he used a Gypsy Curse as his most effective weapon. The peak of the legend happened in 1997, during the funeral of Jimmy's father, Grover Marks. The procession was massive, a line of cars stretching blocks. But as a hearse passed City Hall, Jimmy did something that became local legend. He ordered the hearse to stop, right there in the middle of traffic, in front of the seats of power. Jimmy got out, opened the back door where his father's casket lay, and spoke into the darkness of the car. He didn't say goodbye. He told his father's spirit to get out. He told the ghost of Grover Marks to go inside City Hall and haunt those offices until the end of time. He wanted his father to be the permanent, invisible auditor of the people who had raided their home. Jimmy Marks passed away in 2007, but if you ask any longtime city employee, they'll tell you the atmosphere in the building never quite reset. Whether you believe in curses or just the power of a man's unshakable will, Jimmy Marks got what he wanted. He ensured that the city would never forget his name. Next time you walk past City Hall, look at the windows. If you feel a sudden, unexplained chill, just remember Grover is still in there, and the curse of Jimmy Marks is still on the clock. So yeah, I hope you guys had a good time today, and make sure you leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Wherever you find Southern Ghost Stories, please leave a review. Also, go to the Southern Ghost Stories on Facebook, Instagram. Send me some questions, and I'll try to answer them on the shows here in the next few weeks. I'll be back on Tuesday with some more weird and wild ghost stories. I'll see you guys then. Check out the exclusive shirts from Monster City Madhouse, Gravestone, Rocktober, and Val Halloween. All that and much more at MonsterCityMadhouse.com.